Starting with this school year, New York schools will be required by law to provide instruction in mental health to all elementary, middle, and high school students. Welcome. I'm Tim Kremer, the Executive Director of the New York State School Boards Association. In this edition of Newsmakers, I will be speaking with the CEO of the Mental Health Association in New York State, Glenn Liebman. We will discuss the role his association has with this first-in-the-nation's law, plus other mental health-related topics. So Glenn, there is a new law that has come into play. We're the first in the nation, as I understand it, to have a law of this nature that would require that mental health, the concept of mental health, the things associated with mental health, be embedded into the curriculum for elementary, middle, and high school students. Tell me about this.
Well, thanks for the opportunity, Tim. A few things. First of all, that it will be, you're right, it's embedded into curriculums. At the middle school level and the high school level, it's going to be part of health classes. So it's going to be, germane, when somebody is teaching a health class, they will be mandated to teach about mental health as part of that health class. It's not mandated as to, how long they teach it, or, how many days or anything like that, or a specific curriculum, but it is mandated that they do teach about mental health in schools. At the elementary level, it's more about social, emotional kind of conversations that are going on. And again, there is no set curriculum. We've put some curriculums together, which I'm sure we'll talk about, but there's no set curriculum. But there is, there is the mandate now, or whatever we want to call it. There's the expectation that from, elementary school through all the way through high school, mental health education will be embedded into schools.
Well, I appreciate the flexibility, and I saw that there is not a mandatory curriculum that everybody must follow. But I do have a copy here, the cover of a guide that was put up by the State Education Department. They entitled it Mental Health Education Literacy in Schools, Linking to a Continuum of Well-Being, Comprehensive Guide. This is something I think your organization participated in the development of. While this is deep into a lot of ideas and guidelines, there is still a significant amount of flexibility at the local level.
There is flexibility at the local level. And I just want to say that the State Education Department and school boards and other folks in the education community have been really great partners in this. This was a collaborative effort between the schools, educators and, associations, and, the mental health folks. And this document was a compilation of some really excellent work that was done and very thoughtful. The process was very, there was a lot of conversation. And I think that what you see is an outgrowth of this is a really, significant document.
We did not support the original legislation that you had proffered. But then as we started to discuss this with our members and with learning about others who in the field, there was an epiphany, I must say. And we put on a summit back last year in 2017 in May that was very well received on the issue of mental health. We did another one on Long Island this past year. We've partnered with the school administrators in New York State to do several around the state. And everywhere I go, people are talking about the issues of mental health. So I've got to believe that this is something that is really the feedback you're getting from school districts is something that is positive?
It's very positive. It was something, again, it's a long time coming, and we've been advocating for this legislation for many years.
So why is it so important that there be a law that says you need to do this?
Because I think there are some schools that have done it a wonderful job about embedding mental health into schools for many years, and that should be acknowledged. There are many schools that do that, but there are some schools out there who are outliers who really don't talk about mental health in schools. Now we know that the statistics bear out that 1 in 5 youth have a mental health related issue, and we also know that people generally don't seek services. Youth don't seek mental health services. And this law is not about seeking mental health services. It's not about psychology 101 or anything like that. It's a law that's basically kind of a soft touch to talk about mental health in schools. So those, individuals who might have signs and symptoms of a mental health related issue might be able to go seek services, seek support, talk to someone who they a respected adult who might be able to help them. This is really we look at this as a soft touch, and we look at this as kind of part of a wellness scale, that it's not just about, we're not just talking about mental health here, we're talking about the whole spectrum of healthcare. So when a youth or somebody might have a question about mental health, that they know that they can seek support or services.
I want to talk about the staffing part of it.
Sure.
So you're going to have certain people who, I'm going to say health instructors, health teachers, maybe beyond that, who are going to be actually delivering instruction. I'm going to assume, though, that because this is trying to share with students, there are certain signs that they should be aware of, taking away certain stigmas that they might notice in others and themselves, that this is also going to lead us to a call for additional psychologists, counselors, social workers, nurses.
And you're absolutely right, Tim. One of the things we are advocating for, and I'm sure it's a key advocacy piece for you, is that we have to embed more social workers in schools. We have to embed more clinicians in schools, because we realize the ratio of social workers or other clinicians, psychologists in schools is incredibly small. I mean, incredibly large in terms of the ratio. So we have to make sure that there are more of those in school, because there is going to be more of a need for that. And there's going to be more of a need to sort of talk about health in a little different way. And that's sort of what we're trying to be sort of, upfront. And that's why I applaud, as I said, the members of this committee who basically recognize that it's not just specifically, okay, we're one and done here, that there's a bigger picture here. So we're talking about the spectrum of care, and that mental health is one of the important pieces of an overall wellness strategy.
And there were some resources coming from the state to support this effort.
Yes.
Tell me about that.
We have received funding is through the legislature, through the Assembly. Assemblywoman Aileen Gunther, who's the mental hygiene chair, was a key person in fighting for this. That we did get money in the budget, and it's just been followed up with the executive, that we do have the ability. We've created a resource center, and part of what we're going to be doing in the resource center, we've already have a you have a huge bandwidth around the web page, a website, but we also are bringing regional. We're going to hire regional representatives in the field to work with schools to again, in a positive way. We want this all to work, like you and like everybody else who's a key player in this. We want this all to work. So we want our regional people in the field to work collaboratively with all of you to help make sure that if people have questions about how to implement this in their schools, or if people have any concerns about it, that we're there to be helpful.
A training aspect, not a monitoring aspect.
Correct. There's no monitoring from us at all.
Okay.
Correct. And one of the things one of the commitments we have is to do regional forums as well, which I'm sure we will utilize your great expertise and the expertise of your members around the state to help come together to bring in, have regional forums in different parts, much like you have done as well, to have regional forums, bringing in all the players to have these kinds of continued conversations.
When you're ready, let me know.
Oh,
because we got to do that sort of thing. I can tell you that the appetite among my members to know more about what they can do to support the mental health of their students and their faculty is really, and how do we do this given the resources we have, or what additional resources are available. And I love this idea of having these training centers, and particularly the fact that you're going to have these around the state, or is there one center?
There's going to be one center. It's embedded in Albany.
Okay.
And again, we will have regional people out in the field.
Okay.
Right. We will have regional people out in the field whose job will be, again, it's not a monitoring aspect at all. It's how can we work collaboratively? How can we create some regional forums? How can we create more interest? How can we make sure we're doing this the right way?
So what I hear all the time is the need for partnerships at the community level.
Right.
Will the people who would be these regional representatives be able to advise my members at the local level who and how to go about developing these partnerships?
Absolutely, absolutely. We have, within our membership, Tim, we have 26 affiliates in 52 counties. And they're all doing, they all do different things. But one of the strengths they all have is a lot of them are embedded in their schools. They work with schools, they work with school boards, they work with different folks. So we're already poised between our regional representatives and our members and our affiliates. We're poised to be able to do that, and I think that we are looking to be collaborators. This is completely about collaboration. You guys are the experts. You all are the experts. We're the experts in mental health, but we're certainly not by no means experts in education. And we're relying on your expertise to help us in terms of building capacity.
You know, one of the things I recall most vividly when I first became aware of this whole issue, and I've really spent a lot of time studying the sorts of things you've been doing your entire career, and one of the gentlemen I spoke to, who was an expert in this field, said, the things they're almost most worried about are people, kids in particular, in rural school districts, because, and he wasn't trying to short shrift the problems that one might have in an urban district or a suburban district, but those resources might be more readily available.
Because this is a big picture issue as well, just in terms of the rural issue. There are counties in New York State that don't even have one child psychiatrist in the entire county.
Wow.
So this is a huge issue in general, but you are absolutely right that this is an issue that we are very concerned about as well. And that's why we're going to have regional people through every corner of the state, even in the small counties, to help in terms of directing people to the services that they might be appropriate for them.
Let me get a little better understanding of the structure here. There's a mental health association.
Correct.
There are members of your organization.
Correct.
And then there is a county mental health department.
Correct.
Tell me the differences and how they interact.
The county, you know, again, we are not-for-profit agencies. That's part of government.
Right.
They are tasked a lot of times with overseeing county. You know, they receive the funding from the state, so the counties are tasked with sort of making sure that the overall development and operationalization piece of community mental health is supported by the county. What will happen is that the counties will give funding to non-for-profits, mental health associations,
like
and there are other
your members.
And there are several other, you know, community partners out there, community, you know, mental health providers who are out there as well, who would receive some funding also. So the counties are in many ways the key piece of it, but we are also integral to the, you know, day-to-day service structure.
So kind of, if I know I'm simplifying, but the counties are kind of contracting out with organizations like yours and others to provide services.
Correct.
Okay. Your association, the representatives that are representing your new center, are out there in counties throughout the state.
Right.
And how would we get a hold of somebody like that?
Well, we do have a website where I think that will, again, provide that information as well. It's called www.mentalhealthednys.org. We're looking, again, we're hoping to work with you and other organizations to be able to spread that information about those regional people, because they're there for technical assistance and support.
So when we talk about these partnerships, who are the likely partners to school districts regarding mental health services?
Well, in terms from a mental health end,
Yeah.
I think that we would.
No, I'm thinking if I'm a school district, am I hooking up with a hospital, a local physician,
Right.
a local psychologist? Who are the people I would want to reach out to?
Right. We provide community-based services. So a lot of what you're talking about with the Mental Health Association, not necessarily embedded in hospitals, so there might be some counties where you might reach out directly to a hospital provider or you know, psychiatrists in the community. But by and large, the notion that we're trying to move forward with is that to reach out to community providers, to reach out to mental health associations. When a specific school district has an issue in some way, shape, or form with an individual and they want that individual to seek services, again, it's going to be based on what, you know, obviously there's assessments done and all that sort of thing. But we are hoping that if it comes to it, that there will be, you know, a mental health association or another community provider who would be available to them to provide support for them.
But that
after
county
care.
mental health association could be a good first stop.
That might be, again, that might be the first point of access.
Yeah.
You know, there's something called SPOA, a single point of access within the mental health system. And not necessarily that it would be the same with schools, but they're used to that sort of, you know, delineation of who should we assess at the top, who should seek these different services. So it wouldn't be a bad idea, again, to work with them. But that's what our regional people are going to be there for, too, so they can help. We're not going to, we're not clinicians. We're not going to sit there and say it's clear that Joe has, schizoaffective disorder or anything like that. We're going to be the ones who are going to say, okay, you have a person in your school who needs mental health services. We'll work with the school or whoever to help get them to get to a provider.
The main message is you're not alone on this.
Correct.
All right.
Correct.
You don't have to suffer
right.
this alone. You may not have any idea what's wrong with this child, but there are people who could help you.
Absolutely, absolutely. We are looking at this as again, soft touch. We're not psychology 101 here. We're not trying to, teachers, as we know, are overwhelmed with material as is. We want to make sure that there is a better understanding about mental health, that there's a better understanding about wellness, that there's more information about stigma, that students should feel free to be in an environment where they can talk about mental health issues or wellness issues without sort of, being worrying about the stigma of the illness.
What are the things that are those learning outcomes
Sure.
that you're hoping to achieve?
And that's a very good question. What we have actually put down, which you'll see, we've put down, from our perspective, an ideal curriculum. And if you look at our curriculum,
And I can get that?
you can get that as of in the next week.
Okay.
And as you look at it, as you look at the curriculum, you'll see it's really, again, I keep talking about whole health and wellness, and that's what it's really about. That to recognize that mental health is on a spectrum of care, and to talk about mental health holistically as a bigger picture. And we're not there to identify, again, that you clearly have a diagnosis or anything like that. It's a much broader perspective, and I think that's one of the things that we're looking at. And by doing it that way, you're lessening the stigma of the illness. And also you're talking about the signs and symptoms of general well-being and general, okay, this is if you have a certain degree of if you're thinking about things too much, then it might be an anxiety-related issue, or you might have a depression issue, but we're not there to tell you that. We're there to say that here are the signs and symptoms.
The fact that you're getting to these kids when they're young is tremendous, because I'm sure there are people who go into adult life, they don't know what they don't know, and never had that conversation about mental health, never had those conversations about the signs and symptoms, the stigma associated with that was taboo. Don't talk about it.
Absolutely.
And the fact that this law says, no, we're going to talk about it, and we want you to be aware of this, it's got to open up some people's thinking here.
That's the bigger picture that we're hoping for. We talk a lot about prevention in all sectors. And we've talked about mental health prevention for many, many years. It's always sort of like a catchphrase. We talk about it. Well, we want to do something about it. And that was the whole genesis of this, is that where can we use our best sort of abilities to provide, people with sort of preventive services and to at least have that discussion. And we thought that education was certainly that frontier for, all of us in terms of prevention.
I do think this is it's going to open up people's eyes and ears and hearts and minds to the concept that, we do have people walking around here who need some assistance, need some extra help, some extra attention, some resources. And they're not going to be able to learn or take tests or move on to that next learning outcome without some attention to what's happening inside.
And I can't tell you, Tim, as well said, I can't tell you how many people in our journey now, in terms of, since we've had that 20-month window before implementation to talk about this law, how many people have come to us and said, I wish my child, had this when they were growing up, or I wish I had it when I was growing up. I would be a different person today if I had sort of, been better educated about mental health.
Absolutely. I've heard it all the time. And I've talked to you about, I have a brother who committed suicide. And I looked at that. He was 38 years old when that happened. And it wasn't until I got involved with this movement that you're involved in and understand, I thought, you know what I was reading about, the type of person self-medicating, depression, losing this and this, and getting to that point of despair. And I saw that when he was a little kid. And I'm sure my parents had no idea that there was a mental health issue here. I don't think anyone in the family did. But when I read all of the materials that were coming out of your shop about this, I started thinking to myself, that's my brother. And it was, stereotype.
Yep.
Amazing.
Yep. And I've got to say, and it's very, significant and important that you are talking about this publicly, because I think that's part of how we get
right.
to combat the stigma. And I got to say, last year at our conference when you spoke, that was one of those moments where it was incredibly powerful and cathartic for us as an organization to hear, somebody who's a major integral person in the education fabric of New York to be openly talking about the mental health piece of it.
Well, it's cathartic for me too,
Yeah.
because I now have a better sense of what might have been going on with it. Feel guilty that I didn't understand it at the time, but at least I can speak on his behalf, and
Right.
hopefully
Right.
For others who might look at this as a sign. Speaking of that, family.
Yes.
I mean, we talk about what we can do on the school level. We talk about the people whom you employ and who are members
Sure.
of yours and
Sure.
all the clinicians out there. But if the family's not involved, this isn't going to work.
Absolutely.
And the family's got to have an understanding of what's going on and support this effort.
Right.
Tell me about family engagement.
Well, family engagement is integral to what we do in general, and it's certainly integral to what we're doing around mental health education in schools. We have an individual on our staff whose full-time job is around family integration and family engagement, and they're in a consultative role around the whole structure of what we're doing regarding school mental health. So there are going to be all kinds of information. We're very aware of that. I'm a family member myself. There are other people out there who are family members, and we want to make sure that we're doing a good job of engaging families. We have calls. We have a call coming up, and one of our speakers at our conference is the head of the PTA. So we're doing everything that we can to make sure that families are involved, because we know, as you said, they're integral to everything. If we don't have family buy-in about mental health related issues, then it's, we're in the wilderness in many ways. So we need that strong voice of the family.
I would hope the buy-in comes because, with any group, that there could be one person who could have a dramatic impact on that group. And in a family setting, you have one person who is having mental health issues, maybe significant mental health issues, the impact on the family.
Yeah.
And we're all walking on eggshells, and everybody is worried about how this person's going to react, or
Right.
what's going to happen
Sure.
tomorrow, and this sort of thing and that sort of thing, and where are they?
Right.
I got to believe that the family would look to this and say, boy, if we could bring this problem to resolve, this would have not only benefit our child, our family member, but we the family together.
Yep. No, well said. I totally agree with that, and that's what we're hoping happens, because I hope that families who are not as on the surface as interested in this issue, saying, "Well, mental health, it's not that significant to my loved one." Well, it's significant to all of us, and I think that more that the families get the information and hear about what we're talking about here, I think that could be part of the structural change that we hope happens as we get more and more involved in prevention efforts.
I can imagine some of the discussions that might be taking place around the kitchen table in the future when my young son comes home and he's had some instruction earlier in the day and a conversation about something having to do with mental health, and coming home and I, the alpha male father, is thinking there's no mental health problems in our family.
Right.
And then here's my son saying, hey, Dad, what do you know about this, this, and this? And I'm starting to learn things from my son that all of a sudden, if I'm honest with myself, go, maybe I should be more open to these
Right.
conversations and more aware of the possibility that me and we might have some problems here.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we say mental illness is not a sign of weakness. Actually, it's a sign of strength that you're willing to acknowledge that mental health is.
Absolutely.
And you see that more and more. You see that with athletes now. You see that with Kevin Love in the NBA and other athletes coming out and talking about this. I'm an alpha male. I'm an NBA basketball player. And I have panic attacks, and I have anxiety, and I have depression. That's okay. That's powerful to be able to say that, because that's a strength to be able to acknowledge that. And get the help that you need rather than suffering in silence.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, as I understand it, you have a conference coming up.
Yes.
Tell me about that.
Sure. It's October 17th. It's taking place at the Albany Marriott, and it's basically bringing in experts like yourself, teachers, other administrators to, bring together the mental health and education folks and have these kinds of conversations, talk about how the law is being implemented to this point. It'll only be a month in, but sort of get an early sense of where we're going with it, and to have people there, who can talk with a level of expertise to say, okay, here's what we recommend you do. And we're bringing in a national expert around social emotional learning, who's one of the top speakers in the field on that. And we have the commissioner speaking, and again, we have a panel of experts who are going to be speaking as well. And we're really excited about it. We have, I've got to say that our attendance numbers, it's early, but our attendance numbers are spiking.
And who would be the likely members of the audience?
Well, it could be everybody from a school administrator. It could be, somebody from school board. It could be a teacher, an educator. It could be a mental health professional. A lot of mental health professionals are, working closely with the schools. I know a lot of our members work closely with the schools. Not necessarily embedded in the schools as a social worker or psychologist, but they're in the schools. So for counselors, it could be for a whole network of people. We look at this and say, boy, there's a wide breadth of people who would be able to take advantage of what we're offering.
I love a makeup of an audience like that. We've done these 2 summits that I told you about, and I was thinking I'm going to get this school board audience. Well, what I got was school board members, school administrators, but a whole bunch of people who are professionals in the field. And I've never seen this happen in a school board association meeting as much as it did, where there was a sharing of practical professional information. I know a website, I know a book, let me give you my card. And it was amazing, the networking and the sharing of information and the expertise that existed right in the audience. And I myself got a whole lot out of those things.
Yeah, and that's great. And I felt that way in the advisory committee meetings. I'm like, wow, I never thought of that. I've been doing mental health for 1,000 years, and I'm like, wow, I didn't realize the educational aspect of that. Wow, I didn't think of the social emotional piece of this. So it was really, it's great learning experiences.
You're talking about this in a way that reminds me of so many times when we're talking to boards of education about the need to be open-minded. You're entitled to your beliefs and values and philosophies, but so am I. And we got to respect one another. So when you go into a room and you say, I think I know all the answers to this, well, maybe you don't. We've got this new law in place, first in the nation. You got to be very proud of that.
We're very proud of it, yes.
Very proud of that.
We are.
And I know that prominent politicians and other policymakers have spoken out and provided kudos to you and your organization. And they themselves are very proud of the fact that they passed this legislation and have helped fund your center. When it's all said and done, what's your vision of what measures success?
I think what we want to get out of it, it's funny, I've been asked that question many times, and I think you articulated it perfectly. Your answer about the families at home talking about mental health, that we are that this is a movement around educating the entire community about mental health and talking about prevention and talking about the fact that people who do have a mental health related issue can recover and move forward in their lives. One thing I didn't talk about, which is very prominent in our advocacy, which I think was very helpful, it's a sad number, but the average onset of mental illness for over 50% of the population is age 14. Until they receive services, in many cases, that's 10 years. There's a 10-year gap between the actual beginning of a diagnosis, beginning of an illness versus actually seeking support and services. Those 10 years are incredibly impactful. Those are the most impactful 10 years in an individual's life. It could be the difference between ending up in a prison setting, jail setting, or home. We don't want to think about those kind of outcomes, but those outcomes are real, versus being integrated in the community and being successful like so many other people and being very productive. And part of that is that education piece. And if we can do a good job with that, then those kinds of outcomes are completely different, that we have less people who are going to be in those kinds of situations and more people out there who are being productive members of society because they have a greater understanding about mental health and wellness and recovery. And then you have those same conversations with your family as you described. Those are the kinds of powerful kind of conversations that we hope will change the mindset of the entire community.
14 to 24 is a time when a lot of bad decisions can be made or some really positive things can be done and with the right training and the right sort of guidance. So, Glenn, it's been a pleasure having you here. I really do appreciate it. And congratulations on the passage of this law. It's an honor to have you here and also to work with you on making sure that those outcomes that you're seeking, the goals of this legislation, actually do come into play.
Great.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you.
Thanks to my guest, Glenn Liebman, the CEO of the Mental Health Association of New York State. Additional information on mental health will be available on our YouTube page. Thank you for watching, and we will see you soon with another informative edition of Newsmakers.